Many people often say that the United States is the world's hegemon, controlling the operation of the whole world. Well, I'd like to ask, in a closed system, what does one need to master in order to control the operation of the entire system? The answer is just 4 words: production and distribution. Let's take an example. Suppose you want to be the leader of a village. You only need to control 2 things. First, the output of grain, and second, the distribution of grain. As long as you have a grip on these 2 aspects, everyone in the village will have to follow your command. Similarly, we call the United States the world's hegemon because for a long time in the past, the production and distribution of the vast majority of resources on the earth were dominated by the United States. Take industrial transfer and the globalization order as an example. The whole system was created and dominated by the United States. In the 1940s, the United States was the unparalleled industrial powerhouse in the world, and its production capacity was almost equal to the sum of that of other countries. It was truly the world's factory. However, at that time, the United States only had production capacity but lacked the ability of distribution. In order to strengthen national strength, since the 1950s, the United States launched a large-scale transfer of manufacturing industries. In the 1950s, the United States transferred the textile and steel industries to Japan. In the 1970s, Japan transferred the toy and clothing industries to the 4 Asian tigers. In the 1990s, China undertook the low-end industries from the 4 Asian tigers. On the surface, it seemed that the United States was giving away its industries, as if it was giving up its production capacity. But in fact, it was not the case. The United States retained the most profitable high-end manufacturing industries and firmly controlled the global production chain through industrial chain suppression. What does this mean? Let's take the iPhone as an example. The United States only controls the core technologies. As for the tasks, such as processing and assembly, there is no need for it to do them by itself. In the United States' vision, since it holds the mobile phone system and chip technologies, as long as it masters the core technologies, it can freely arrange for other countries to produce mobile phones. With this technological superiority, the United States actually controls the global industrial production chain. Moreover, in order to further strengthen its control over the world, the United States has also extended its reach to the resources of countries around the world. The iron ore in Australia, the gold mines in Africa, the oil in the Middle East, and the global grain trade are all resources that the United States focuses on controlling. Through such resource allocation means, the United States has formed the embryonic form of globalization. By the 1990s, a pattern had initially taken shape. Resource countries, such as those in the Middle East and Africa, provided resources. Production countries like China and Southeast Asia were responsible for producing goods, and consumer countries in Europe and the United States absorbed the production capacity. At the same time, the United States, with the help of the US dollar hegemony, carried out financial control over the world and ultimately achieved the concentration of production and distribution power in its own hands, becoming an undisputed superpower. In order to ensure the normal operation of this production system and the stability of the US dollar hegemony, the United States has built the most powerful naval fleet in human history and established hundreds of military bases around the world. It is precisely because of this that from the 1990s to 2000, the national strength of the United States reached its peak. Of course, the United States did not achieve this goal smoothly. During the process, it encountered at least 2 major challenges. The first came from the direct confrontation of the Soviet bloc. The Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, to put it bluntly, was a competition between the Soviet Union and the United States for the production and distribution rights of the world. The second challenge came from the rise of Japan. In the 1980s, Japan posed a challenge to the global hegemony of the United States. In 1980, Japanese cars accounted for 80% of the imports to the United States, directly threatening the 3 major automakers in Detroit: General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler. This was undoubtedly destroying the production capacity of the United States. In 1985, Japanese semiconductor companies accounted for 50% of the global market share, directly impacting the United States' control in the high-tech field. At the same time, in the 1980s, Japan maintained a long-term trade surplus with the United States. In 1986, the surplus even reached as high as $100 billion. Moreover, Japan held 50% of the US Treasury bonds and became the largest creditor of the United States. This was a direct challenge to the distribution system of the United States. Therefore, in 1985, the United States and Japan signed the Plaza Accord. Judging from the later results, this was essentially a trade and financial war launched by the United States against Japan. In 1986, the United States and Japan signed the Semiconductor Trade Agreement, which was actually a technology war launched by the United States against Japan. In 1987, a tariff war broke out between the United States and Japan. After these 3 rounds of contests, the foundation of Japan's economic growth was destroyed. In the early 1990s, the economic bubble burst and Japan fell into the lost decades. With this understanding, let's take a look at the most fundamental contradiction in the US-China trade war. First, let's consider the competition for the right to production between the two sides. At the beginning, the United States was highly vigilant against China. In the 1990s, the famous US strategist Zbigniew Brzezinski clearly pointed out that China was developing too fast, with its GDP doubling in a decade, achieving in a short time what the United States and the United Kingdom took a decade to accomplish. It was truly a miracle. So he advocated suppressing and containing China as early as possible. Therefore, we can see that the United States made many small provocations in the 1990s, such as the Galaxy incident, the Taiwan Strait crisis, and the bombing of the Chinese embassy. At the same time, there was always a powerful force within the United States desperately trying to prevent China from joining the WTO, not wanting China to catch the express train of globalization. Coincidentally, in 2000, the United States suffered from a neoliberal economic crisis, and in 2001, it was hit by the September 11th attacks. These two heavy blows severely damaged the US economy. At this time, the United States was in urgent need of a large-scale economy to help it out of the crisis. And China also desperately needed to cooperate with a country with massive capital to promote domestic economic development and industrial upgrading. So the two countries hit it off. In 2001, China successfully joined the WTO. It has to be said that sometimes it really seems that there is a kind of national fortune at work. Since joining the WTO, China has completed its first industrial upgrade. Subsequently, with the triple dividends of the Olympics, the land finance, and the export economy, China's economy has developed at a high speed for a decade. In the 2010s, China embarked on its second round of industrial upgrading, and that's when the United States finally realized something was amiss. The globally lucrative industries automobiles, smartphones, home appliances, shipbuilding, aircraft, and semiconductors had long been the traditional strongholds of the United States and other Western powers. Yet, within just a few years, China achieved remarkable breakthroughs across these sectors and began to compete on the global stage. By 2018, during Trump's first term, China had effectively completed its industrial upgrading in home appliances and smartphones. Alarmed, the United States swiftly moved to suppress China's progress. However, after 7 years of intense confrontation, the US was stunned to find that the more it tried to hold China back, the stronger China became. Today, China has reached the global pinnacle in automobiles, smartphones, home appliances, shipbuilding, and aircraft manufacturing. Even in semiconductors, a field where it was once technologically blocked, China can now independently produce chips above the 7-nanometer node. When the United States analyzed the global industrial chain, it was horrified to discover that China accounted for 35% of global production capacity and was the world's sole nation with a complete industrial chain. From the US perspective, China's current position mirrors that of the United States during World War II, dominating global industrial output. This marked the complete collapse of the US's control over global production. Turning to the competition for the right to distribution, since the 1970s, the United States has employed a distinct strategy to plunder global wealth. First, leveraging its formidable comprehensive national strength, it flooded the world with US dollars through trade deficits. For instance, when China earned $300 billion from trade with the US, That $300 billion represented the dollars the US pumped into the global market. One can liken this influx of dollars to releasing fish fry into a pond. Subsequently, the US deliberately instigated conflicts through various means, such as wars, color revolutions, and US dollar interest rate hikes. Once other countries' economies collapsed and their currencies depreciated sharply, the US swooped in to acquire their assets and foreign exchange reserves at rock-bottom prices. In this way, the US achieved a twofold goal. It reaped substantial profits, enriching the nation, and simultaneously retrieved the dollars it had previously circulated. By repeating this cycle of raising the fish, casting the net, and reclaiming the currency, the US continuously exploited global wealth to sustain its high standard of living. However, since the 21st century, the US has encountered significant challenges. Firstly, its age-old tactics proved ineffective against China. Thanks to China's financial regulatory measures and robust government control, the US has been unable to seize China's wealth by creating economic crises. This explains why the US has persistently pressured China to liberalize its financial markets in a bid to gain easier access to China's economic resources. Secondly, not only has the US failed to exploit China, but China has also actively impeded the US from preying on other nations. Consider a scenario where a country goes bankrupt due to war. Desperate for recovery, it might mortgage its land, minerals, and oil to the US at rock-bottom prices in exchange for reconstruction funds, effectively falling victim to US exploitation. But with China in the picture, the dynamic changes. China, with its robust industrial capabilities, can offer to handle the post-war reconstruction efforts. Instead of demanding immediate payment, China might propose bartering infrastructure services for oil, natural gas, or food, or suggest signing mutual trade agreements to bypass the US dollar. As more and more countries choose to collaborate with China, the US faces a double whammy. Fewer countries remain vulnerable to its exploitation, and when dollars flow back to the US, they bring little tangible wealth with them. With an excess of dollars circulating solely within the US and unable to flow globally, inflation and rising prices become inevitable. In essence, after multiple rounds of competition, the US has gradually lost its grip on global distribution. The recent tariff war serves as a prime example. When Trump launched a trade offensive against the world, China rallied the BRICS countries, the European Union, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations (ASEAN), and others to formulate countermeasures. This was, in essence, the establishment of a new economic circle, further eroding the US's control over global production and distribution. When China joined the WTO, the US naively believed it could maintain the upper hand. Little did it anticipate that after 24 years of development, the nation that once could only absorb low-end industries has now transformed into a global hub for technology and innovation. As the old saying goes, fortune's wheel turns. The East may yield to the West in 30 years, but never underestimate the determined young.